Hi, it's Miguel. This is Devlog number 2, going over the dungeon design, room layouts, the tile set, and the enemies. This is part of a quick little two-part on the dungeon design for the game Sparky Co. Thank you for tuning in. So let's begin. Originally, it started with me trying to follow Black Thorn Prod's random dungeon level generator videos, and it worked great. The only issues I was having was that I couldn't control the size of the dungeon. So 15 or 7 could be the difference of the number of rooms the player would have to go through to go ahead and complete that dungeon. And so I just felt that was too much of a difference. And so what I did instead was I started trying to create a different random dungeon level generator, and I just couldn't get it to work. So rather than just continually to spend time and not sort of rush to learn the skills that I need coding wise to be able to get that right, instead what I did was I ditched that and I went ahead and went for a more handcrafted approach. So that was a bit more of a pain, since I don't really necessarily like designing dungeons, just because I don't think I'm particularly good at that. But I found it to be a lot more fun when you're not looking at an completely ugly tile set. I mean, this is not gorgeous looking, but man, it's so much better looking than the first red and blue one that I was showing on here. So, which is nothing compared to how it looks now. And so after I tried that random level generation, the issue I was having, to explain it specifically in detail, was I'll use the analogy of a gate. So you go ahead and you use the random dot range. This is Unity C#, by the way. You use random dot range to be able to call a random number between 0 and whatever the max is. In this case, the max was the array dot length, right? And so when that happens, I would then instantiate one of the rooms, and it had to be done in a way where any openings had to be closed. There had to be a direct path that the player could get to get to the exit. Like if it was a locked room, there needs to be a key and whatnot. And so, or the exit room should not have a path that leads nowhere, right? So the issue I was having is, during that instantiation right there, the gate opens to instantiate the random number that was produced on the random dot range line, right? Okay, so the problem I'm having is, while the right one instantiates, while that gate is open, other rooms instantiate too. Then by the time that gate closes and that loop, so to speak, is done, I have anywhere from like 3 to 4, maybe even 6, 7 extra rooms. That ends up having huge differences in the amount of dungeons, and actually that would later play that same issue. That's why I knew it was an issue that I was having. And so the same issue popped up during the challenge room setup. I couldn't get the random number is supposed to equal, in this case, a particular room. If you're trying to call a random list of, a random enemy from a list of enemies, I was having the same issue. I'm trying to instantiate one instance of an object and I'm getting multiple. So right now what you're seeing, the green environment, all this was pretty old artwork. This was the old project that I combined with what Sparky Co originally was, which was just a game where you repair items for cash to save a hobby shop. I didn't really know where I wanted to go from there. So once I was at this point where I was ditching this artwork, at this point the hero is a capacitor. But you see these fugly tile sets right here? I just had to come up with something quick. And so like you see here during this dungeon generation right there, the rooms would instantiate, it shows the boss and whatnot. The rooms would instantiate, but I couldn't control the size of the dungeon. So at that point, I had kind of just stopped doing artwork and just focused on the room layouts and getting the dungeon generation right. That didn't work out, so I just really stuck my guns to just handcrafting it. And so, for example, here was the placeholder tile set that I was using. And so you see that the pathways there's like a pathway marked, the little silver center area. That's supposed to mimic the bottom of a circuit board, the solder points of a circuit board. And those pathways are like just little circuit paths. And so that is really just an idea that was carried over from the clip that you just saw a few seconds ago, where the capacitor hero at that time is gliding over what looks more commonly like an actual circuit. So I made it more dungeon looking and I got a little more creative with it. But even in the old green looking one, I already had like bug enemies that I wanted to have. And so by the time I got to this point, I was already kind of starting to give up on the random level generation, and I just started to focus more on the battle mechanics, making it actually fun to play test, so that maybe in the hope someone will actually want to download this and enjoy this. I mean, look at all this writing. Nobody wants to read all this. So I made it much more simpler, much more where the player will learn about the environment as they play. My goal is that you don't need a walkthrough to complete this. So I just focused on the player experience and just worried later about how I was going to fix that issue. Then I started working on some different walls, and that's what you see here, just walls and then some floor tiles, and the very bottom is just some little sketches of a burnt up wasp nest comb. And then here, these are the different icons when you see the dungeon select screen. Every 5 repairs that you do at the hobby shop, you get to choose one of these levels. The 6th one, the scorpion one, that's the final boss. So as I just kept ignoring the dungeon generation and just stuck more with the eventual handcrafting, I got to focus more on the enemies that you would find. So basically the enemies that you find in all the dungeons are basically a chase and melee enemy, an enemy that will be stationary and shoot, an enemy that will patrol an area, once it sees you, chase you and either shoot you or perform a melee attack. And then lastly, which is what you see here, is a object, some type of enemy that spawns other enemies. So in this case, this is my little idea of a wasp nest. And so this will, when you get close enough to it, it will actually go ahead and spawn some wasps that will chase you. And then right here you see this is just once you kill an enemy, this is one of the explosion animations. I thought it'd be I always like that in the Mega Man, like when you blow something up, you kind of like see the explosion. I always like that, so I try to mimic that. And then these are some of the items that you can break. They're different statues, pillars, and then the bottom is like a little light I'm working on. I wanted to do something with it, but I'm still working on that. And then here, these little circles with the colors, there's door systems that require specific shot types. And so those are all the different colors. And then one of the things you might have seen there at the bottom is an orange box. So that orange box is a BNC box. And those are scattered around each dungeon, and they provide tips to the player that are super helpful. It's not just going to tell you like something about the world of Sparky Co. No, all of these tips will get you something. They'll either help you defeat the boss quicker, or they'll go ahead and help you obtain an ability to go ahead and navigate the dungeons, with a lot more ease. So one of them, for example, gives you a tip, a hint as to how you can obtain the fire shot in the wasp dungeon. And that's pretty much it for this one. I'm still working on a couple things from what you see here, but I'm just trying to get it to a point where it's like a playable dungeon, and I have a really, really good visual idea of what it is I'm trying to present to you as a final product. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. The third one is going to actually go into the specifics of the challenge room, which was my Indie Dev Hour post on Wednesday. And that went into how you obtain the boss key in this dungeon, which is in that challenge room. So I'll be discussing more in detail the puzzles, which are, I don't want to say a big part, but they're a pretty fair slice of the pie in these dungeons, because they help you gain abilities, but it also helps you gain the boss key that you need to be able to beat the boss. So I call it the boss seal. So we'll start calling it that. But thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. Have a good one. If you want to hit me up with any feedback, my DMs are always open on Twitter at Tertiary Map. Have a good one. Stay safe.